Okay, thanks very much, Chris. Good day to everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar. This is the ASQ Lean Enterprise Division webinar, Lean Forward, an Introduction to Lean. Our learning objectives for today are introducing Lean. Where did it come from? What is it? How do we use it? Why do we care? Lean practices, Lean tools that will be used in the implementation of Lean programs. And for those of you who have an interest in moving ahead and becoming an experienced practitioner, I'm going to close out with just a little bit of information about Lean certification, how that can benefit you as an individual, and how that can benefit your organization. Just a little bit about myself. My name's Lance B. Coleman. I am the ASQ Lean Enterprise Division Publications Chair. I am also currently leading the initiative to identify and develop Lean curriculum, low cost and free for offerings to our membership. I have experience, I've been working in the medical device, aerospace, and defense industries probably for 15 to 20 years. And over that time, I've worked in the quality engineering, continuous improvement, and Lean implementation professions. And that's me in a snapshot. Now let's talk about Lean. So, why Lean? Who wouldn't want to do more with fewer resources in less time? Lean promotes employee engagement and retention. Lean can be applied across broad and diverse industry sectors such as manufacturing, service, health, transactional, and government. I would also add to that it has applications just in your everyday personal life. Okay, when did this come about? Lean actually has origins dating back to Henry Ford and the turn of the 20th century here in the United States. What we know as Lean today is based on the Toyota production system developed in the 50s. And currently, a number of national surveys have indicated that more than 60% of American companies either have a Lean program or utilize some type of Lean tool deployment. And upwards of 15% have a mature and fully integrated program in place. So all of these companies can't be wrong, at least hopefully not. So, an introduction to Lean. What about it? Lean is a philosophy that embraces respect for the individual, putting the customer first, and the pursuit of perfection in all things. Lean is a system of thought meant to stimulate innovation through the elimination of the various wastes that take up valuable time and resources. These first two I really want to key in on because so often Lean is thought of by those who aren't familiar with it as this toolbox. Okay, you have a problem, get the Lean toolbox, get the risk management toolbox. It's so much more than that. It's really a way of thinking that underscores all of the activities of an organization. And of course, Lean is a methodology for achieving cycle time reduction. Where does Lean flourish? It flourishes in an organization which does the following: that promotes key cultural enablers, safety, standards, leadership, empowerment, and collaboration. You cannot innovate in an environment that's not safe. Having standards in your environment is going to promote organization and consistent outcomes. Leadership is pivotal in ensuring that Lean philosophy is embraced from the top down. And without empowerment and collaboration with all employees, a Lean program will not succeed. So an organization that builds its business on the core fundamental of respect for the individual. An organization that provides cross-training and resources to implement the program. Having a cheerleader is all well and good, but if you're not going to provide the resources that are needed to give people the tools to implement the program, again, you will not succeed. How? How do we implement lean? By embracing the following philosophies: engagement and empowerment of employees, planning and decision making based on the voice of the customer, continuous improvement in search of perfection. By following practices such as Hoshin planning, Kaizen programs, and Gembawalks. Using lean tools in your day-to-day activities such as 5S, standard work, visual workplace, layout, SMED, and so forth. Some key terms to understand if we're going to talk about lean are waste, which is anything that takes time, resources, or space but does not add to the value of the product or service delivered to the customer. And of course, value, a capability provided to a customer at the right time and an appropriate price as defined by the customer. An activity that the customer is willing to pay for. An example of that I like to use if you're thinking about purchasing a sofa. Well, there are many different steps to the creation, manufacture of this sofa, including fabrication, assembly, test, and inspection. But if you look at the one activity of putting a bolting two parts together, that's an activity that the customer would be willing to pay for. Because in effect, if the bolt's not there, the sofa could come apart and not be able to function as it's designed and desired to do, as opposed to an inspection step that does not add value from the perspective of the customer, even though it could be an important step, a needed step. But the customer doesn't really care about that. They just want to know that they got their sofa on time and at the right price, and it works as advertised. Anything else that goes into that is just a cost of doing business that the manufacturer has to factor into their pricing. Now, there are 8 wastes that we're going to talk about. You have defects, which just any type of error. It could be a manufacturing defect. It could be a paperwork error if you are a service provider. Overproduction is the time, energy, resources, money put into producing something that's not needed. Typically, this would be if something was produced according to forecasts from a customer, and then it had to sit in inventory for several months before it could be shipped. This is time, money that's tied up in product that you really cannot get back until it's actually sold and delivered. And the time, the machine time, the employee time, the resources, all of that put into producing that inventory that can't be used, that is overproduction. And that is a waste, because these resources could be used in some other manner that could have a more immediate payback. Waiting. How often had we had to wait on a project or a job because there was no paperwork, that certain tools that were needed were not ready, or one step in a manufacturing process operating faster than the preceding step, and so often there's a wait while it's waiting for product to hit its gate. This can be just minutes at a time, but when you start to look at over the course of a year and multiply it by many people, you could have hours and days and weeks of downtime just from unnecessary waiting. So it's a very insidious waste that you need to be aware of. Non-utilization is how are we utilizing our employees? Do we have an employee that has specialized skills that aren't being used? Do we have someone that's maybe gone back to graduate school to get their degree, and as they've learned more and gotten more skills, their job function hasn't adjusted? Have we gone outside for consultants to provide training when we have those same skills inside the organization? So non-utilization or underutilization of assets, particularly employees and their capabilities. Transportation. moving stuff around unnecessarily. Do you have a pallet of material that you need to get to in your warehouse and you have to move other material out of the way so that you can get to that pallet? Any type of unnecessary movement of product or materials is the waste of transportation. Inventory. Okay, so we've overproduced and now we have this inventory. And again, that is a waste of just material sitting there that you cannot time. Inventory represents time, money, materials, and other resources that can't be recouped until it's sold. So whereas there could always be a requirement to have some level of inventory to wet the production line, to get things going. There may be some contractually obligated buffers, but the goal should always be to minimize the amount of inventory you have on hand, because those are resources tied up that you just cannot recoup until they're sold. Motion. Motion comes from unnecessary motion of an individual. This could go to ergonomics, a poorly set up workstation, or walking across a work floor to get something that you need. A simple example would be, and most of us have had this happen to us, you work in one office and the printer that you're assigned to is 2 offices down the hall, and you have to walk down the hallway every time to pick up a piece of paper that you print out. So any type of motion for the individual is a type of waste. And excess processing. Less is more. Doing more than is required by the customer, but not adding any true value. One example of that might be a product that requires plastic bagging, one with a certain specification, and your organization decides, well, if 1 bag is good, 2 bags are better, so let's double bag everything to show our customers that we really care. Now meanwhile, this doesn't add any extra protection, and whereas 1 plastic bag may be pennies, but when you start to look at hundreds of shipments, thousands of bags over the course of the year, this is money that could really add up, and add up very quickly. And that's just one simple example. There's actually a true example of something that I have seen myself, but there are many different types of excess processing where we just want to do something good for the customer. But if it doesn't add value to the product or for the customer, then it's just excess and it's waste. Voice of the customer. Very important concept, because lean is all about seeing your organization, your processes, and your products from the voice of the customer. The voice of the customer are the needs and expectations of those who purchase or use your products or services. One key thought to remember is that the voice of the customer can express implicit as well as explicit needs. So what exactly does that mean? Have you ever, and most of us probably have, looked to buy a house or a car, and the realtor or the salesperson has met all of your list of needs, and it's in the price point that you wanted, but some niggling little voice was keeping you from pulling the trigger, from making that purchase? That's because there are implicit needs that you have that you didn't even recognize that weren't being met. And sometimes implicit needs can be even more important than explicit needs. And so you need to be aware of those from the perspective of your customer. Another example in a manufacturing setting is if you look at a bolt that has some very detailed ANSI specifications about thread width and pitch, and your bolt may meet all of those specifications, but there's an implicit need that this bolt needs to screw into a part or make 2 parts together. And if that function is not met, even though the explicit needs of the specification are met, the implicit needs of function are not, and so that product is unacceptable. 5 core principles of lean. They are value, value stream, pull, flow, and perfection, or its pursuit. We've talked a little bit about value. Let's look at some of these other terms. So the value stream is just everything that we do, the entire set of actions required to take a specific product from raw materials to finished goods per the customer's demand. Flow, the accomplishments of steps within a value stream so that a product or service proceeds from the beginning of the value stream to the customer without waste. Well, that's a mouthful. Let's talk about what it really means. Basically, in a perfect world, when the customer uses something, a replacement will flow to them at the exact time that they need it, and it will be there. So the trigger is the customer's use, and then that pulls forward all the activities from upstream that will produce the product and deliver it to the customer. Push and pull are the 2 primary systems you'll find in organizations. Push systems produce a product or service according to a schedule based on forecast. Pull systems, as I just mentioned, initiate production-based signals signifying a need from downstream stations to an upstream supplier, whether internal or external. So basically, once a station gets to a certain level of raw materials or some goods, a signal is initiated that will pull more materials into that station. Well, we talked a lot about lean, and just want to touch very briefly on the difference between lean and Six Sigma. Sometimes we do have a bit of confusion about that difference, so let's just touch on that briefly. Lean, they're both improvement methodologies, first of all. Lean drives improvement by reducing process waste and production cycle time. And Six Sigma drives improvement by reducing process variation. They can be used separately or used together, but that's the distinction between the 2. Okay, so we talked a little bit about process waste and process variation. What is a process anyway? A process can be thought of as an activity that transforms inputs into outputs. Some examples of process inputs might be the 6 M's: man or woman, the actions or activities of the individual, machine, whatever equipment's used, material, the types of raw goods or components, the method, what are the work instructions, how is this activity supposed to be carried out, measurement, are there any measurements that need to be taken, are there any measurements that trigger certain actions, and Mother Nature, which typically is thought of as environmental requirements, temperature, humidity, and so forth, but also that could include cleanliness or any risk that exists in the environment, safety or otherwise. So you have these inputs, you have a process that transforms them, and then you have your process outputs, which would be product, and that could be parts or a service, required records and documentation, or it could be some sort of signal trigger. For a process to be considered lean, 3 conditions must exist. The transformation must take place, value must be provided from the perspective of the customer, and it must be done right the first time. Now, these upcoming sections, many of the practices and tools, I just want to recognize that they could be their own 1-hour webinar, or in some cases 1 or 2-day workshops. But I'm hoping to give you a good overview and still some practical tips that you can deploy when you finish this webinar and go back to your organization. So visual workplace. Visual workplace is very important, especially in a cross-cultural and international environment, business environment that we have today. You have so many people with different languages, uh, different cultural cues, and so anytime that you can provide information visually and without words, that's going to be a benefit. Now, these two examples that I want to give you are one is in a molding manufacturing facility, injection molding, and you have three molds here. And for those of you who aren't familiar with injection molding, think of it as a die. This is what produces the part. Clear means that the mold is ready to go back in the press the next time that job is running. Yellow means the mold has been cleaned and or repaired, but there's still additional steps. Usually that would be some sort of sampling and inspection before it's given the okay to put back in the press. And then the red in the background means that repairs still need to be done. And so the tool room should be the next group to touch that particular mold. Then going across the bottom of this slide, you have three cabinets with spare tools. In one cabinet you have the blue, which are qualified spares that are ready to go into the mold when required. The yellow cabinet are those tools that need further testing or sampling to be qualified. And in the red are those retired tools, or tools that have never been worked on or sampled. The quality, as an additional precaution, the quality department owns the keys to the yellow and the red cabinet, and the tooling department can only access the blue cabinet. Now, expanding on the visual workplace, we have visual management techniques that are used to put together a strong organizational environment, or sometimes to deal with problems that have occurred. For instance, this situation led to this visual management control. And my personal favorite, this individual led to this control. So if you're a true crime buff like myself, and if you're ever worried about being kidnapped by a deranged serial killer and tossed in a trunk, you now know that our newest cars have a safety mechanism to let you get out. Kaizen. Kaizen is a very important program that helps drive continuous improvement within an organization. It's translated generally as continuous improvement, and is taken from the Japanese words kai, which means good, and zen, which means change. So how does it work? Basically, Kaizen strategy calls for ongoing efforts involving everyone, always looking for better ways to do things and better ways to solve problems. The elements of the Kaizen program are continuous improvement suggestion system. People provide the tools, training to implement their own suggestions, and it's reward system based. Is Kaizen just another suggestion program? No, not at all. There are elements of suggestion programs, but here are the three key differences. Participants are trained to use root cause analysis to arrive at suggested solutions. Kaizen should pertain to either safety, quality, or waste elimination. Initiators are responsible for implementing their own Kaizen once approved. Now, they may not have the resources or the knowledge always to fully implement their Kaizen, so they may need contributors. For instance, if an operator has a suggestion about a Kaizen relating to maintenance improvement, the maintenance staff may be contributors to that Kaizen, but the initiator is the one who would track the progress, report the results, and so forth. Okay, here are the steps just generally when initiating a Kaizen. identify an issue or potential improvement, confirm with management, determine root cause, determine corrective action or improvement, implement corrective action or improvement, verify the effectiveness, standardize, close the Kaizen, and reward. Here's a typical Kaizen form. You'll see across the top, you have the date, submitted by, what shift, contributors, if any, what's the title of the Kaizen. Then we also add, what is the problem type? So is it waste? Is it safety? Is it quality? We also added eventually a fourth category of business improvement so that we could capture dollar savings from Kaizens as well. And here's a sample Kaizen. It's filled out. You can insert pictures, drawings, just write in a narrative. In this particular case, the Kaizen was that a shift supervisor had to go to each press at the start of the shift to make sure the jobs had started successfully and that there were no issues. And the spaghetti diagram on the left shows the path that he had to take every morning. And this took a good while by the time he walked along, spoke to everyone, checked with everyone, and went to every single press. And the idea that for this Kaizen was to have a status light installed at the end of each press so that the supervisor only had to go to the start of the lane. He could look down and see in an instant when presses were yellow or red what needed his attention and go immediately there. So this saved days, many man days of time over the course of a year in instituting this process. Typical Kaizen board. In this case, you have an idea column. You have an implementation column where Kaizen have been approved. Once completed, the initiator will put it in the completed column, and then the Kaizen coordinator, in this case that would be me, I come along, I collect completed, and once a month we will review to make sure that the Kaizen was successful, that it was standardized, and then if it's eligible for reward. Once the Kaizen, we determine that the Kaizen is eligible for reward, it goes in the rewarded column. The rewards are announced during the quarterly employee meeting of all employees. And then once the rewards are announced, then the rewarded Kaizen are pulled down, they're scanned and saved. Plan, Do, Check, Act is at the core of any improvement project, ongoing continuous improvement initiative. It's a method of problem solving originated by Walter Short and then later referred to as Plan, Do, Study, Act by D.O.W.N.T.I.M.E. The key to this process is that these steps must be taken in repeating cycles until the problem is solved. And each step is comprised of sub-steps. So plan, you identify a problem, you describe the problem, you develop an action plan. Do, you investigate, you determine a corrective action plan, you implement this plan. Check, confirm that the corrective action works, or this could be an improvement action if it's an improvement that you're looking to implement. If it doesn't work, then go back to the planning stage and continue the loop. If it does work, then you want to standardize the corrective action. Next, we have Gembawalks. In Japanese, Gemba means to go where the action is. Gembawalks are also sometimes referred to as management by walking around, and it entails upper management walking about the facility, observing operations, conversing with frontline employees. The Gembawalk should be fluid and not rigid like an audit per se. However, there should be some overall theme or goal to each Gembawalk. So it may be time management, it may be line clearance. the upper management should be open to any topics discussed or brought to their attention, but there should still be an overall theme to the Gembawalk. And that's something that's often overlooked by less mature organizations. Okay, lean tools. What are some of the tools that we use? Well, standardization and standard work are critical, again, to successful implementation of lean. Standardization is a system of using policies and common procedures to manage processes. So consistency of build, consistency of method. Standard work is a precise description of each work activity specifying cycle time, takt time, which can be thought of as consumer consumption rate, work sequence, and minimum inventory needed to complete the work. And here's an example of standard work where you have what is the step, how many working seconds, is there any wait, is this a step where there's transportation involved, so you're walking or transporting for so many seconds, key points, what are we doing here, and the reason why are we doing this. The reason you want to have all of these is, number one, you want to capture all the activities that take up time so that you can optimize your process. And two, you want to challenge yourself. Why are we doing this? What is the reason for this step? There may be a better way to do it. It may be possible to eliminate a specific step. So you want to challenge yourself at each level to say, why are we doing this step in addition to what are the key points? Because this is an instruction that the operator is using, and then capturing the time so you have an accurate time study to develop your cycle time for this process. The Greeks have a myth of Sisyphus, who was punished by given the task of going to hell and rolling a boulder up a hill. And as soon as he would get to almost to the top, the boulder would slip and roll back down to the hill. And that was his punishment for all of time, to try to get that boulder up to the top of the hill, but it would keep rolling back. And so this is the antithesis of standardization, because as individuals, we tend to go back to our old ways of doing things, of falling into old patterns. So when we put an improvement in place, it's absolutely critical to make sure that we have standardization through new work instructions, training, and so forth, because we want standardization and not Sisyphus. Okay, 5S. This is a very often used tool and somewhat underrated. The 5S are sort, remove unneeded material from work area, set, logically organize remaining material, shine, clean and sanitize the area, establish permanent practice and related instruction, so standardize, and sustain, maintain the improvement. So many people think of 5S as just a cleaning program, but it's really a lot more than that. It's about preparedness. As you organize your workstation, you are more prepared to begin work quickly. You have all the paper, the pens, the tools that you need. Do you have all the materials set up that you need to begin this job? Are things removed from the area that could get in your way while you're performing your function? You're not just cleaning, you're making sure that all of your implements are working properly. So again, this is much more about preparation than even cleaning. And I would say that cleaning is a positive byproduct of the 5S tool. Let's look at some examples of 5S. Here, this is a utility cabinet. It could also might be a tool crib. I mean, how often have you had a specialized tool that you couldn't find and so had to delay a job while you were looking for it, or a tool or item that was sent out for repair that you weren't aware of, and so a job had to be delayed because of that. This gives you a visual cue like, okay, something's missing. Do I need to be concerned about that? But it doesn't always, 5S doesn't always have to be a bunch of tape everywhere either. In this case, we had a setup where equipment, as a contract manufacturer, we ran different jobs at different work centers. And so the configuration of the work center would change often from job to job. So what we did, rather than tape the area, we did a layout and put this sheet in the engineering book that comes out whenever that job comes out to the press. So this is one more example of 5S. I mentioned before that Lean can often be used in your personal environments. Here is from my own pantry, actually. It's been 5S. We've got items sorted by category. A little hard to see, but you've got the labels in there telling what it is. And then you have a red dot, which is your reorder quantity. When something gets down to the level of that red dot, I know it's time to reorder the next time I go to the store, and so it goes on the sheet here as a list to the next time I go out. The reason I felt this was important was because this came at a time when, during the Great Recession, when I was partially employed, I didn't have a car, and money was tight. My wife was not well, so who usually took over the cooking. And to get myself organized, I said, well, things were running out. I was constantly back and forth to the store. It was just a real pain getting the shopping done. And so I said, how can I make this better for myself? So I 5S'd the cabinet, and I ended up, because I was ordering more efficiently, I shaved my weekly food bill by 20%. I cut down on one trip per week to the grocery store, which I was very grateful for since I had to schlep on the bus to do it. And it really helped me quite a bit. Now, eventually my wife was better, and she took over. And my wife's reaction, who's a chef and artistic person by nature, when I proudly showed her my organization system and how I'd gotten through these few weeks without any assistance, she absolutely hated it. Up came my tape, and everything got reorganized a different way, because she was much more into creative chaos as an organization system. And I share that story for two reasons. Not every tool is perfect for every situation or for everybody. And then the second moral of the story is, if you use lean principles, it's not only going to be just a good thing organizationally, but lean principles can actually impact your bottom line. Here's a before example of 5S, and same area. Look at the amount of workspace that was cleared up. The key to remember when you're talking about 5S, it's a mindset as well as it is a methodology. So you're always looking to organize, to sort, to set, to shine, to sustain whenever you go into an area. This can be done on a computer desktop as well. Once a year, I'll take the time just to check my folders, check my files, see what needs to be deleted. Often when I'm working on different projects, I'll save a file to my desktop just so I have quick access to it. Then over time, you look up and you have a desktop that's full of files that have been saved elsewhere that's just clogging up your computer. So 5S is, again, a mindset as well as a methodology. Layout, you can see the benefits. This is actually a true layout for a metrology lab that I worked in. And you can see there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of walking. And then the new layout, very well sustained. And the change went from an average of 65 minutes per shot to 30 minutes per shot, just by having a more efficient layout. Value stream mapping, an enterprise level process map that includes takt time, cycle time, and obstructions to flow, as well as value-added and non-value-added activities. Here's an example. Fighting waste. Below is a matrix showing the 8 wastes and just some of the tools that could be used to fight them. Some of them we've covered today, some of them we have not. Okay, lean enterprise. And when you talk about a lean enterprise, that's the organization as a whole. A lean enterprise is one in which lean philosophies and practices are embraced, resources and training is provided to implement the program, management at all levels is engaged, and trial and error is encouraged. Siloed thinking is eliminated. The role of the individual is to be engaged with existing programs, use lean tools and methods regularly during your day-to-day activities, promote teamwork as well as resource and information sharing, fight against siloed thinking. And moving on to lean certification, those of you who want to gain more experience and have a professional credential relating to lean, there is a lean certification partnership between ASQ, AME, the Shingo Prize, and SME. And the purpose is to lead industry in the development of a universally recognized professional credential that facilitates alignment of lean practices, provides standard methodology for measuring lean knowledge and accomplishment, focuses on the development of lean professionals, differentiates and progresses with lean knowledge and competency. The benefits for the individual: demonstrates solid understanding of lean principles and tools, validates your ability to implement tactical improvements that show measurable results, allows you to develop career planning milestones. You gain a portable career credential, share and gain lean knowledge through mentoring others. You are aligned to the lean knowledge and competency standard and attain abilities recognized across industries. Finally, you develop a portfolio of your experience. When you're pitching this to your company or organization, certification holders provide tactical implementation of lean tools that provide measurable results. With an established lean standard, companies enjoy a clear understanding of the capability of their resources, provides the opportunity for significant training and development. Mentoring is a fundamental part of the lean program, helping to mold new lean experts. It standardizes lean practices within organizations, regardless of size or industry. So in conclusion, lean is a way of thinking, a systematic program, and not just a series of tools. Lean can be used to improve various settings, such as those found in manufacturing, service, transactional businesses, and government. Lean drives improvement by eliminating waste and reducing cycle time. Two of the key tenets of lean are providing value from the perspective of the customer while creating an environment with respect for the individual and empowerment of employees. Some resources: you have the ASQ Lean Enterprise Division website, a recommended reading text for those who want to become certified. There's also the ASQ Lean Handbook, and on my own website at fullmoonconsulting.net, the library tab has different articles, presentations that I've done on lean, risk management, and quality over the years. Are there any questions? Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Lance. That was awesome. For those of you that have any questions outside of today's webinar, or just other questions that you don't want to pose in the webinar itself, you can reach Lance at the information on the screen. You can also reach him for a copy of the PowerPoint if that's of interest to you. The recording, of course, will be available. Let's go ahead. There are a few questions. Let's go ahead and go through those, and I think we're going to be able to get out of here on time. Before everybody runs off, though, I want to jump back to those slides afterwards and just remind you what next month's webinar is and where you can find the recording. So we'll do that right after the Q&A. The first question, there's actually a question, and I think a statement that goes along with it. The question was, can Lean be incorporated in your own system? And the comment was, we have incorporated Lean in their, not even going to guess how to say this, but it's basically their factory planner and demand planner and various other programs at their own plant. So I think it sounds like they're looking for maybe a little bit of comment from you where else they can be implemented and incorporated.
Okay. Yes, Lean does not have to be an either or program. And if you look at the key tenets of Lean, which would be looking at operations from the perspective of providing value for the customer, employee engagement and empowerment, and breaking down siloed thinking, that really coincides with any type of organization or continuous improvement methodology. And so Lean, in absence of that, you can go with a purely Lean program, or you can merge Lean with existing continuous improvement and quality programs.
All right. Don Wild asks, in order for Kaizen to receive a reward, do you have specific criteria it must meet, or is it subjective? Who reviews the Kaizen results?
Okay. Well, in our case, we have, and I will say that amongst our own corporation, the different sites do it different ways. We decided that we wanted to offer rewards. Not every site does. Some of them have drawings, but we felt that we wanted to just offer, and they're small rewards, more recognitions than anything else. So, for instance, we have they were 2 movie tickets, and then we changed that to $15 in your paycheck for each completed Kaizen, an extra $10 if it's a first-time Kaizen. We have a drawing from safety-related Kaizens for a Ferris Bueller day off. But to answer specifically your question, there is a committee of the management team. We have, and myself, so we have 10 managers, myself, so a quorum of that group. So 5 people of the management team come together and review the Kaizen each month. And the criteria is, well, do we agree that it should have definitely been approved? That's number one, because we have the approval happening at the first level of supervision, because we want to flow down as much responsibility as possible. So we first ask ourselves, should this have been approved? And then if the answer is yes, then we look at, well, was it successful? Did it meet the success criteria that the initiator set? Did it address the problem that it was supposed to address? And if so, then how has it been standardized? And that might be through a tooling change, it could be a work instruction and training. Once we determine, yes, it has been standardized, then we can sign off on it as approved for reward.
All right. Next question. What are your feelings about having work, wait, and walk times listed in the standard work? The comment is, I found that listing these times has a tendency to promote the status quo.
Good question. Typically, the reason that we want to identify those times is because we want to, it's a time study to some effect, because we want to capture, well, what are the cycle times and what are the opportunities for improvement. So within each step, there could be delays or waste, and that just helps you to identify potential waste within an operation. So yes, you're establishing what the status quo is, but in a lean environment, you're always asking the question, can we do better? But in order to do better, we have to determine what the baseline, or if you want to call it the status quo, currently is. Good question.
What kinds of challenges have you encountered while implementing Lean?
I'm fortunate in that the organization that I'm within has been doing Lean and Six Sigma for over 13 years, and every level of the organization is active. I would say because the way we're set up, we have a process excellence group, and then we also have lean practitioners and Six Sigma practitioners at each site. And sometimes the biggest challenge we have is setting aside the time for actual implementation of improvement projects. For instance, I'm the site lean program manager, but I also manage the customer complaints, CAPA, internal audit program, and do lean training for the site. So, and plus production support. So finding the balance in your time would be, I'd say, the most significant challenge. Because if lean is truly implemented, you're going to have successes. But it's a matter of getting the time allocated and continuing management support, understanding your other deadlines to work on these improvement projects.
Perfect. Patricia wants to know if you could tell her a little bit more about the lean certification process. What is required for bronze?
Okay, I am going to defer to my dear friend Chris Hayes, who happens to be the expert on that for the Lean Enterprise Division.
So Patricia, thank you, Lance. I don't know if I'm an expert or not, but I've been through it a few times. So Patricia, bronze is the lowest level. So you've got your bronze, silver, gold. The first thing that you have to do is you have to pass a test. So all levels have a test. The test for the bronze is all tool related, the very basic language of lean. Once you pass that test, what you have is a portfolio that's required. Right now, that portfolio is 5 projects that you have to define within a PDCA, what we call a PDCA formatted portfolio document. What would probably be the best thing for me to do if you're really interested in learning a little bit more about that is have you contact me and I can actually show you some of the forms. But in general, you have an exam and then you have 5 projects that you have to document. And once you send both of those in, you're going to receive your certification. The exam gives you a certificate of attendance or of completion, but the two together give you the actual certification to LBC, which is a Lean Bronze certified. My information, I'll flip back on my screen in just a few minutes. We're going to jump back there anyway before we go on to the other questions, and you can get a hold of me if that's all right. Next question. What is the preference between choosing Lean and Six Sigma?
Okay, that's a very good question, and it can be somewhat controversial. However, I will give you my opinion. Six Sigma, as I said, the goal is to reduce variation in a process, or in other words, to optimize that process. For me, I don't see the value in optimizing a process that's full of waste. So I would typically look at Lean at least in conjunction with Six Sigma or prior to implementing Six Sigma, depending on your organization and the projects that you are looking at.
All right. This one's going to lead right into this. Is process variation, considered a waste in your opinion? Where does lean manufacturing address variation waste?
If a process varies too much, it leads to waste, is the answer to your question. Because once a process varies too much, then defects are created, which is a waste.
The question is, what type of rewards do you give for your Kaizen events?
Okay. For us, we don't do Kaizen events so much. We might have like a celebration, maybe lunch, provide lunch or something like that around a key successful event. But what I was describing was more a Kaizen program where you're talking about small changes. So for a Kaizen event, typically we would have a recognition and maybe provide a meal or something like that for the group or for the or site as a whole, just depending. And for the Kaizen program, where you're talking about small incremental improvements, then as I said before, that might be movie tickets, uh, $15 to $25 added to your paycheck for each Kaizen. We also do reward $10 to $15 for contributors to Kaizen. So if you touch a Kaizen, you're getting some benefit out of it.
How do you make change happen if it's not coming from the top down? Do lean principles need to come from the top down?
Another good question. The best thing, the short answer is, for successful enterprise-wide deployment, it has to come from the top down, and it has to exist at every level. Now, you have, as an individual, have control to some extent of your own environment, your own resources. So you can, in some cases, lead from the middle by successfully deploying lean tools and practices and achieving better results and pitching to upper management that, hey, I received these results using these practices. I recommend that we expand on that. But you're always going to be limited to a certain extent to how much you can do if upper management is not on board.
Lee is thinking about implementing lean, wants to know what the first step is, and do you have any guidelines for implementing?
Yes. I'll answer briefly, and then I'll say, if you just shoot me an email with that question, we can just follow up in more detail. But I would say that there are certain levels of training that have to be established. You need to have a certain level of training for top management so they really understand what you're trying to accomplish and buy in, but just not so detailed as you would have for those that are going to lead the charge out within the organization. So you have a level of training for executive level management. You're going to have a second, more detailed level of training for your lean leaders, and then you're going to have a third level of training for those who are going to engage with the program, but may not need such an in-depth level of training. So you need those three things, and then I would say go back to that cultural enabler slide where we talk about what okay. So you need to make sure that these cultural enablers are in place. And as I said, I can have a more detailed discussion with you about that, but that would be my short answer. And feel free to email me at my email address, and we can have a dialogue about that.
Okay. Is Gemba and Gembawalks only applicable to manufacturing or to service industry as well?
Absolutely. It is applicable to service industries. There was a great book called Gembawalks for Service Excellence, written by Bob Petruska, that I would recommend. It's a quick, easy read, gives great service examples. But the key to remember is that you're going where the action is. If you're in a service organization, that's where your services are being provided or being created. So yes, 100% it can take place in service as well as manufacturing environments.
Okay. Let's see here. What is the typical time frame to initiate the program and take it to maturity phase?
Okay, there is no typical time frame. I mean, some people may argue with me about that, but I would say 1 to 3 years would be a good time frame to think about, where you can really start to get the culture embedded, start to get some feedback. As a matter of fact, I'm working on an article for our newsletter now about deployment of lean in King County, Washington, which is Seattle. And this took place, started late 2011, and they're in phase 2, and they've made tremendous progress, but they still have a ways to go before they would consider themselves a mature organization. So again, 1 to 3 years is a good time frame to say to get started and get it established. You would not be mature at that point.
And last question: at what level in the Lean program would value stream mapping be used?
I would probably say that depends. Typically, I would say fairly early on, but though you want to have a more experienced practitioner doing it. And the reason that I would say value stream mapping is it should be early on is that you need to look at your processes and see where the waste is. And it gives you an enterprise level view. So we're talking about from customer order to shipping, receiving, and all the way out the door. And so that gives you the opportunity to identify gaps and waste in your system. I would also say you'd want to combine value stream mapping with process mapping so that you can drill down to the various processes that are shown on the value stream map and really see what's going on in there. But I would say early on by an experienced practitioner.
Okay, and last question. I lied last time.
Okay.
How does one establish a balance between low inventory and not have work stoppage due to the lack of inventory?
Each organization has to define that for themselves. You would need to develop, do some time studies, do some modeling, and determine what is the minimum amount of inventory that you need to avoid work stoppages. Now, once you've done that, that's your current state, that's your baseline. But after you've done that, then you start to look at how can we improve our processes, how can we eliminate waste. As you start to eliminate more and more waste in your various processes, you'll see just naturally that you're becoming more efficient, more able to respond, react more quickly, and so that inventory, the need for an inventory buffer will decrease over time. But the most important thing is to be true to yourself. What inventory buffer do we need to make sure we're not having work stoppages? And then you go about saying, how can we get better and make adjustments accordingly as you see things change. And it will become apparent when you can start to reduce inventory.
All righty. Well, thank you, Lance. Appreciate that. And I'm sure everybody else appreciates you spending the extra time to answer some questions. I know I do. I know you've got other things that you got to get back to. So with that, we are going to end the webinar for today. Thank you very much for everybody that was able to attend. We had a really large audience today, so that was exciting. Hopefully we will all see you back next month. Have a wonderful fall day and take care.